Awesome. Thank you for coming. We're so happy that all of y'all are here. Big crowd.
Love it.
Love it. Thursday, bringing the energy. We're almost through the end of the week. Hopefully everyone's had a great week. So today, I might have asked some of you out in the audience as I was walking around, like, why are you here? And there was one theme, shockingly, in all of the answers, and it was security. So I'm guessing most of you in this room care about security. Woo! But I'm guessing that you don't want to be the only person in your organization that cares about security. Am I right? Awesome. Well, today we're here to talk about culture and how you can leverage culture to truly force multiply the security outputs that are important to you and important to your organization. And I'm joined here with two incredible people, some of my favorite people that I've had the opportunity to work with, but they represent two very different perspectives. This is the service team perspective, engineering perspective, and this is someone from a leader in our security org. Will you both introduce yourself real quick? Bridget, you go first.
Yeah. Welcome, everyone. My name is Bridget Johnson. I'm currently in AWS Identity. I've actually been there for 10 years. I love everything identity, access management, policies, all that good jazz. But yeah, I own and operate AWS services that you probably care about. Identity Center, Access Analyzer. You probably care that my teams are continuously raising the security bar every single day. So I work with security a lot to make sure that my teams and engineering teams are doing that. So I'll be talking mainly about the service team perspective today.
Thanks. My name is Bill Shin. I'm a senior principal in AWS security. I work in the office of the CISO. I've been here a little over 12 years. I was hired as the first specialist solution architect at Amazon Web Services of any kind, and it was in security, primarily because security is such a priority for us that customers, I was a field-facing role at first, customers have to get security right, and we have to get security right, and so we needed architects to help customers securely build on the cloud. About 5 years into my time here, I moved into work for our CISO, Steve Schmidt at the time, and created the Office of the CISO. In that role, I do a lot of policy and regulatory work, work with our service teams quite a bit, and our proactive security teams and AppSec teams, our security operations teams. And I still lead the technical field community in our sales organization as well.
They're both being very humble with the roles. Both of them have played a huge role in ensuring that culture, security becomes embedded in the cultures and the orgs that they operate. So let's talk a little bit about the outcomes that we care about. Like, culture's great, but we're here to talk about security outcomes. Bridget, what I want to know from you as someone who leads engineering teams, what are some of the security outcomes that are most important to you?
What's most important to me is that we are continuously raising the bar on security. And to get there, right, your engineers, they're in your systems, they're building your systems, they're creating features, deploying new code. And what I care about is that those engineers, they have eyes and ears on the ground, that they have the right way to say, hey, this is a little wobbly, this is a little wonky. They have the right people to pull in, and that they can actually surface issues, whether it ends up being a real issue or just something they're worried about, or or maybe not, right? And so I care about every single engineer having a path to report a security issue.
So it sounds like you want your engineers to take ownership for security.
That is what I wake up every day and hope for and think about as a leader.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you want them to feel psychologically safe.
I do, yes.
To be able to talk about security, to be able to escalate and not worry about the implications of escalating. And
I would actually say, like, it's not even only worry, we celebrate it. Whenever an engineer brings a security issue up, we celebrate it. They get an email to our VP gives them kudos. We actually foster it.
That's awesome.
Because it's a lot better when you find it internally rather than a customer discovering it.
Absolutely. And it also, you made a point of, you want them to be able to drive these decisions in a way that helps us remediate anything that might be happening as quickly as possible. So high velocity decision making is super important.
And that all comes with access to the right people and the right perspective.
Absolutely. And all of this is for one large thing, and it's for our customers. We want security to become a business enabler. And Bill has had the opportunity over the past 12 years in his role to work with hundreds, might I even say thousands of customers.
Tens of thousands.
Like, I would be shocked if there weren't. Has anyone in this room met with Bill Shin before? Anyone? Oh, I got somebody. I got another person. Woo, I knew it. Steve Mack. Yes, definitely met with Steve Mack. Bill has had a lot of conversations with customers, and Phil, will you share just a little bit of a perspective of how important it is for customers in those conversations?
Sure. I've done a lot of thinking about this, and security is one of those things that's kind of a need, not necessarily a want. And security people get really excited about their job in security, but it's really just a part of, it's sort of necessary but not sufficient to get value out of the cloud or to get value in a business. The goal is to enable your organization, whether that's a public sector organization and you have citizens, or you're a business and you have customers, to really get the outcome that you want as a business. So if you're selling pet food, or you're selling books, or you're selling delivery or airplanes or anything else, that's really the goal. And to do that successfully, you have to take security first. Otherwise, customers get disappointed. So when we talk to CISOs and we talk to customers, it's really important that the security teams really understand what it is that the ultimate goal is. The goal isn't security for the sake of security. It's security so you can build a business or build an organization that serves people. I think very early in my career, when I was writing snort rules or working on firewalls or hardening systems or those kind of things, I didn't really pay attention to why when I was very young. And as I got a little further in my career, I started to ask the questions like, well, what does this thing do? And they're like, well, it's a database, so it's an application server. No, what does it really do? Like, what does it do for people? And I think keeping that in mind as in security is the outcome. And our organization has to, AWS Security absolutely understands that the goal is to ship services that delight customers. And that is our top goal. It's obviously security is the top priority, but we don't matter if we can't ship code and we can't delight customers with services. So that outcome is like on top of mind for everybody.
And one thing that's interesting here is like you see the burden and the empowered is I should hate Kristen and Bill, right? Like if you actually kind of like think about the norms of security, but that's not the reality. We collaborate throughout the year. When I have to make a trade-off or a risk assessment, I bring in folks from AWS Security. They are partners. We collaborate. I've worked with Bill for many years. I'll pull him in as we're making decisions, or somebody from his team. And so you kind of have to foster that constant. It can't just be security versus the service teams. It has to be that you both have this shared goal to ship code. And so when you find a risk, it's all about, okay, how do we mitigate it? How do we reduce the risk? And you get really creative. And I love when we come up with better solutions because we've highlighted a security risk and we're actually pushing forward to mitigate it. It's a really beautiful scenario when that happens.
Just to add on to that, I think one of the, we talk more about security issues as if they're detected like in real time, like a bad thing happening. Most security work, though, it can be planned, right? Like it's predictable. Like we know what regulatory environments we're working in. We know what compliance artifacts we need. We know that TLS 1.1 is needs to be deprecated. We know that we're going to need to patch. And those things, we try not to surprise our service teams. And so with planned work, security atrophies over time. Like you have to always be working on it, even if it's not like an urgent security issue. Years in advance sometimes that you're going to need to modernize cryptography or things like that. So for us, one of the things that we take very seriously is not distracting you from shipping and delighting you with features. So we identify risks, we see things and look around corners, and we try, and we're much better at it. I think now we've learned a lot of lessons, sometimes the hard way, of being able to plan that work and collaborate.
So 2 things these folks are really good at, engineering and security. Same with myself. I realized I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Kristen Hott. I also sit within the AWS security organization. I lead a program called our Guardians program, which I'll tell you a little bit about. But our team is focused on making sure that every service, every new feature, every significant change that takes place in an AWS service is reviewed by a security engineer before it goes live into production. None of us are culture experts. In fact, like none of us have training on it. So what I wanted to do before we really dive into this is take a kind of a first principles approach to culture. What is culture? So this is actually just a definition I found online. One of the first links I clicked on, I think it was Merriam-Webster, and it said culture is the collection of values, norms, shared behaviors, and knowledge that characterizes a group of people or society. So let's think about that. Values, those are the things that are important to us, right? Norms, those are the things that are standards and expectations that have been put in place that we follow. Very common one is, for those of you here from the US, you drive on the right side of the road. For those of you in the UK or India, you drive on the wrong side of the road. Those are norms. Values influence our norms, but they also have a huge influence on our behaviors and the behaviors that we collectively share that start to emerge as patterns and practices within any sort of society or civilization or an organization, company. All of those things, those influence someone's purpose, right? Those values, they influence their purpose. But without knowledge, you don't have opportunity to achieve that purpose. So knowledge is really important as well when we're looking at culture. So I bring that up because we're going to kind of structure our conversation around those 3 pillars today. When you think about a culture of security, it's really those values, those norms, those behaviors, that knowledge that is shared by the people at the company that you work with that affect its security, right? People play a huge role in security.
And I'd like to add that this is a flywheel, right? You can't just do knowledge and expect it to change the values and norms. You can't just say, here are the new behaviors you need to, you really need to have a combo meal of all 3 of these going. And then also as a leader of an engineering organization, something I realize is your culture is not gonna change overnight. And as a leader, you need to kind of pick one thing and kind of change the game. And that could be shared behaviors, kind of working through those values and reiterating those values. And you kind of, as you kind of pick one, it will flywheel and grow, and you can slowly change the culture over time. But you need all 3. You can't just pick one.
Combo meal.
The combo meal.
You must be hungry for lunch or something. With that, I think it's a really good point. We're going to tell you a lot of things that we've done that have worked really well for us. We're also going to share with you some things that didn't work well for us. But I want you all here in the audience to try and think of just one thing within each of these pillars that you can take away and potentially implement within your organization in 2025. Don't try and do them all. Just identify one that you think is a good fit within your organization, not within ours, within yours. So with that, let's dive into pillar 1. So when you think about the values within your own company, I'm guessing that your CEO played a big role in establishing those values. Because to be quite frank, communicating the values from the top, it all starts there. They're the ones that communicate those values. And we as an organization have been quite fortunate to have Andy Jassy for the past 18 years say time and time again, security is our top priority. How many times have y'all heard him say that?
I lost count, I think. Yeah.
It's and the cool part is it's not just internally, it's externally. You'll all have heard it on all the interviews he's done, the keynotes he's given. And that's the beautiful part, because then that means our customers know it, and then that means everyone down to the engineer who's checking in code knows it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And something else that's really unique that Andy and Steve Schmidt, our CISO, established was kind of the organizational structure of security. Bill, how did we decide on that organizational structure?
Yeah, I see this really infrequently in other organizations that I talk to. Our CISO, our CSO now, Steve, reports directly to Andy. Our AWS CISO, Chris Betts, basically reports directly to Matt Garman, our CEO of AWS. It was really intentional. I think when Amazon started, I wasn't here when Amazon started, but at the time, if you recall, buying a book on the internet with a credit card was a little touch and go there in the beginning days, right? People were like, I'm putting my credit card over the internet. And I think the culture and the DNA of Amazon has always been a top priority. And if we didn't have trust, and we talk about values and norms, but our leadership principles are online. You can look them up, Amazon leadership principles, there's 16. One of them is earns trust, and it is embodied every single day in our company. And I think this is emblematic in the organizational structure. I think our leaders, they dive really deep into things, and security being the top priority, they want that CEO or that CISO to report directly to the CEO. And I think it gives us, it empowers everyone and particularly the security teams, to have a direct line to the leadership and the voice of the company.
Absolutely.
It's been quite effective, and we'll talk a little bit more about the mechanisms on how we use that organizational structure to kind of promulgate the culture throughout the organization.
And as you all know, Matt Garman is now the CEO of AWS. And one thing that I thought was really awesome that I wanted to highlight was this was part of an email that he sent out to all the employees on the day when he became the CEO. And actually, somebody told me I missed it, but he said it in his keynote as well, that Andy Jassy told him on his very first day that ensuring security for our customers is job zero. So again, it starts at the top. So any of you in this room, I actually talked to a CTO back there. Be the voice of security. Make sure you're talking about it. Make sure you are communicating it, because you might value it, but if you're not communicating that to your teams, to your leaders in public forums, it will be something that can be forgotten, and you want it to be something that is constantly within the minds of the people who are working day in and day out on things that affect security.
Can I add something?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think with CEO of AWS, the CISO reporting directly into that role, we have a lot of trust from our customers. We operate in nearly every country that we can, and in every regulatory and compliance environment out there in almost every vertical. And you trust us with your data. And so it is absolutely the top priority. I think having our CISO reporting to the CEO, I know not every organization does that, and I think it's somewhat unique. And you're probably, how many people are in security roles, like in a security organization?
There you go.
Cool. And how many are not? So I can. That's actually really cool.
I love that.
I love to see
Yes.
that. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think that not every company can do this, right? And I think we'll talk a little bit more about maybe the mechanisms that you can, if you want, use to maybe get the same outcome that we get from having that organizational structure.
Absolutely. So some of you might be wondering, like, well, shit, how am I going to get my CEO to talk about security and how he values security? Well, it doesn't just start, it's not just about them. Every single one of you in this room can be a role model for security. So here's some tips that you can take away to be able to do that and to potentially influence your leadership to talk about it more. One is identify your company's values that drive security. So Bill talked about our leadership principles. Another one of those is ownership. Ownership is such a critical role in how we enable our builders, the engineers that are writing code, to be owners for their own security. So identify those values that drive your security and relate it back to those. Don't try and create a new one. Relate it back to your existing values. Provide a common vocabulary. This is a really important thing. You want to be consistent with how you talk about it. Ship securely is one that actually, I think, Bill, you said earlier, I did not tell him to say that, but that's just something that we say so often. That dates back to many years ago when we were trying to come up with a mission statement within AWS security, and Eric Brandwein in the conversation goes, like, yes, AWS security is the name of our organization, but like the company's name is Amazon Web Services. Like, we exist to ship web services to our customers. But web services or APIs that don't have security built into them, those don't delight you. But services that don't even launch, those don't even have the opportunity to delight you. So that's how Ship Securely came about, something we say all the time.
We have stickers. We didn't bring any.
We do.
But we have stickers. A lot of the AppSec engineers and service teams have Ship Secure, because we got to do both.
Yeah. Avoid ambiguity. We go back to that psychological safety that we talked about earlier as one of our outcomes. People feel a lot safer when the things you communicate to them are very clear and specific. So avoid that ambiguity when you're thinking about this messaging. And then normalize it. Normalize it in every single meeting that you're in. Bill, would you mind telling them a little bit about the ops meeting and how security has become such a part of that?
Yeah, a couple of different mechanisms, actually. We have for all of our content, I'll just bring this up, so I'll get back to the ops meeting in a sec, but
okay.
We have a process called security messaging bar raisers. So we have a hiring bar raiser, we have crypto bar raisers, we have security messaging bar raisers, and it's a group of people, typically principal solution architects or principal level people who, for every piece of content that we ship out, there's an actual messaging review to make sure that we're being clinical and precise in our security language. We don't throw around words like risk and vulnerability and breach and hack or attack. I mean, all those words may have precision in certain circumstances, but it's really important that we don't sell on FUD. We don't create FUD with our customers. We don't create FUD internally, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And so that clinical, precise language, we actually don't just talk about how important it is. We have a mechanism to ensure that, especially for content that goes out in the public, that it actually is clinical and precise when we're talking about security, because it's such a sensitive topic that we don't want to create misunderstanding. And I think that's one. In the ops meetings, so we have a weekly security metrics meeting in AWS security, and it's attended by hundreds of people, and every microservice team within AWS security that does anything, compliance or AppSec or anything, they're expected to attend, and they have metrics that they keep every week, and they may be called upon to present those metrics. It's typically done by someone, kind of junior on the team, like maybe a SDE1 or a SecEng1, someone who's running the systems or doing the thing, but they're surrounded by this really comforting group of distinguished engineers, principal engineers, and it's not.
They're not comforting.
It's not. It's not like
terrifying.
it's not a murder board. It's a place for learning and for going through your metrics, and everyone has an opportunity to ask questions, to ask about latency drops or drop packets or tickets that are too old or whatever, patch status, things like that, operator access, all the things that have tooling and processes around them. The metrics are reviewed. In that meeting, we talk about we start with quick wins, so it starts on a positive note. We each share a doc read of correction of error documents of any kind of issues we've had in the past week. So everybody's learning from that correction of error process, and then we go through each bunch of teams' metrics, as many as we can during that week. But everyone's expected to be prepared to go through their metrics, but it's a learning opportunity. And so you have very pretty new or junior employees learning from and learning how to improve and constantly raise the bar on security.
I just want to go back to the vocabulary part, right? You talked a lot about like what we share with customers externally, but internally as an engineering team, we've worked really hard. Engineers can cut security tickets if they think something's wonky or a little off, or they think they've discovered a risk. And there will always be two questions. Every leader across my organization is, what's the customer risk? What's the customer impact? And I find that engineers just feel very safe cutting these tickets and bringing these issues up because those two questions they're very stick to the facts. They're very like, let's get to the right answer. And then from those two questions, you can essentially go and talk about mitigation and communication as well.
Awesome, thank you. So those are values. Let's talk a little bit about norms. I kind of hated bringing Jeff Bezos into it, but I couldn't help myself because, quite frankly, at the end of the day, he had a pretty big role in establishing the culture of Amazon. And one of my favorite quotes from his 2016 shareholder letter is, "Day 2 is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating, painful decline, followed by death." And that is why we are always day 1. So when I think about things that are excruciating and painful, I think about processes that are being done just for the sake of process, or bureaucracy, or red tape that my teams are constantly having to go through to get anything done. That to me is actually death. Like, no one wants to do that.
And engineers hate it, right?
They hate it.
They like to get things done. Engineers love waking up and getting things done and being able to do the right things in the right way at the right time.
Yeah. So while we value a day 1 culture, it really establishes norms like resist proxies, avoid process for the sake of process, focus on your customer. So norms related to security, though, let's talk about those a little bit. You must have a norm around ownership of security. You must have clarity for your engineers to understand what they are responsible for. And this is the norm that we've established. Every service and product team at AWS is fully responsible for the security of the service or capability that they deliver. Now, I'm not saying this needs to be your norm or your approach, but you need to have one established that's super clear. Now, Bill, will you share a little bit more about why we took this approach?
Yeah, I mean, and I've observed a lot of security organizations in our customer base as well, and there's always kind of the right magic balance between centralized and federated responsibility for security. AWS Security runs a bunch of shared services, things like logging and authentication and a bunch of static analysis tools that our developers use, things like that. But and so we operate internal services, but our service teams, this is almost a practical matter, not so much a moral ownership matter. We are not the experts. AWS Security is not the experts in our service teams. We didn't build them. We don't know how to. We can identify threats and risks and things like that, but we can't fix them. And so I've observed, and lots of other people smarter than me have observed, that highly resilient and effective organizations have a deference to expertise over authority. And when you have a security organization that is exclusively in the I own security, I mean, the buck does stop with us from a security perspective, but we can't fix the services. And so they have to own them. And it's just a practical matter for the most part. It also, the leaders in our service teams hold themselves accountable for security. And we help, we advise, we consult. We have the end in court if we need it, but we can't be effective if they don't own security. And when a service team starts out, they launch the service for the first time. It's generally not a huge team necessarily. They might not have security engineers in that team, but over time, the system gets more complex. The system gets bigger, And security atrophies over time. So if they want to continue running fast and having a good feature flow, they have to control their own destiny. And if they come back to AppSec or they come for a security review and we find issues, they're not going to be able to ship code as fast. So the ownership matter, it's more of a practical matter, but it's also a deference to expertise, because if there is a security issue, we want the people who know how it's built and really deeply understand the complexities of it to be the ones to fix it. And so that ownership it results in a pretty highly resilient organization where the deference is not to authority, that I said it's okay, or when somebody in AWS security approves it or whatever, it's you own it, you built it, and you are the expert. And that seems to be more effective.
And how this plays out in engineering organizations, because I own a lot of engineering teams, is one, we're kind of like what Bill said before, is like we don't want to surprise. So every year there are AWS security expectations for service teams. And we go through and like, okay, here are the big rocks we're going to move, and this is very planned work. And then we also have, security wobbles that pop up where we have to dive in. We have to get the right people in the room. But the engineering team, usually it's going to be a senior SDE and a manager. They lead that, right? And they lead okay, this is the risk. This is what happens in the customer experience. This is how we can mitigate it. And then they get to pull people in because we have this security ticket. It kind of gives you a lot of access to the right perspectives and the right judgment calls. And that's the beautiful part. And I get to decide as a service owner, okay, this is how I'm going to mitigate this risk. This is when I'm going to mitigate this risk, or how I'm going to reduce it. And you review it with a lot of people to make sure we get the right answer. And then we also communicate out in the right ways, and everybody is aware. And then the coolest part is that sometimes, because security does own the tools and they're aware of all the security findings across the organization, they can take some of those patterns and put it back into the tools and go and help all the other teams. And that's like the beautiful part. So you need the knowledge, you also need the tooling, right? And it kind of creates this flywheel of just raising the bar of security.
Absolutely.
An example. I think examples bring it to life a little bit too. I mean, Log4j is a little tired example, but it's a good one. Or Heartbleed, or some of these big internet, threats that have happened in the past, 10 or so years. AWS security identifies the threat, the risk. Oh, hey, there's a 0 day, there's a open defect or CVE. We're going to prioritize that, and so we say, well, this looks really, really bad. Like this Log4j thing, like this could really kind of not go well. And so that's our job to say, here's probably the risk assessment part of it. But the people who wrote the hot patches for our Java kernel and things like that wasn't like EC2 or the OpenJDK team. And then we took that hot patch and the fixes and then communicated them out broadly to all of the engineering teams. But it's this collaboration between the experts who build the services and knowing where in the code path and things like that, a vulnerability could get called, and us assessing the risk. And the trust that you put in us to not be wrong about the risk and the level of risk. Because if it is low priority, it can wait till a planned sprint, it can go in a backlog. If it's emergency though, you don't get to cry chicken, to do the Chicken Little thing very often if you're wrong, right? So we have to be right a lot, which is another leadership principle, and then we have to, in order to maintain and earn the trust of our service teams.
Absolutely. And if you just play that out, right? Like I was working during the Log4j time, and I got to, as a service owner, be like, okay, where are the most critical systems that we got to hit first, and then where are the second and the third? And so Bill would not be able to tell me that, right? I had to know that for my service, and then that's how we were able to kind of stagger the updates based on time.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about how you communicate this to your teams within your organization. I want to touch really quickly on communicating it to your board. This might not be something that you already do, or maybe it is, but it's something that AWS has recently started to do. And the reason why it was so important for us to do is because security was something that we valued. It was communicated, but it wasn't. You want the board to align with your values, right? And so you want them to see and practice how security is incorporated into your culture. And the way that we do this, and just a few tricks for you, is first, we always look at, okay, what are the things we're already updating the board on? Maybe it's new services coming down the pipe or a new vision for an organization. We always make sure security is mentioned in there because, quite frankly, security is going to be a part of that effort in some way, shape, or form. The second thing we do is we talk about new technology. What's the new technology that a lot of us are talking about? Gen AI. We will make sure that we give them insights on what are the security concerns, expectations, strategies incorporated to anything Gen AI related that we're doing across the company. The third thing is current events. Like, what are the things that your board is probably reading in the news? Talk about how you as an organization are thinking about those current events and things that you might be doing maybe proactively. Maybe you're looking around the corner and saying, we want to make sure this type of event doesn't happen in something that we're working on. Or here's how we responded to it, or here's how we talk to customers about it. Those are interesting things they want to learn about. So to wrap up this section, I really want each of you in the room to lean into your company's core values. These were things that we valued, but if you don't do this in a way that aligns with your organization, you won't be as impactful. So let's move into the second pillar, shared behaviors, right? We talked about those values and those norms and how they influence behavior. But what we want to talk about here is some of the mechanisms that we've put in place at Amazon to guide those behaviors, right? And so the mechanism establishes what are the inputs, but what are the outputs that we're really looking to get? And then what is the tooling and the adoption and the inspection necessary in order to ensure we're getting those outputs continuously as a virtuous cycle of improvement? So one mechanism I want to talk about, and I'm going to start with Bridget because she leads engineering teams, is the software development lifecycle. You have to start by identifying, like, what are the security behaviors that we want to see at certain parts of the software development lifecycle, because it can't come at the end, y'all. If it comes at the end, it's too late. So Bridget, will you talk a little bit about, how you view this?
Yeah, so we do security at every level, right? And it starts with a design. There's usually a design doc. We actually, at least in my organization, we added specific security questions, like what are the access controls, like where is the data, what's the classification, right? We added specific questions that an engineer who's doing a design, and this could be a junior engineer doing a small design or a more complicated system run by like a senior engineer. We also bring security in at this stage, and that's really important. If you don't bring security in till that deploy part, you're going to learn a bunch of stuff. People are going to be confused. It is so much more powerful to bring security in, like, consistently throughout. This is where the security guardian helps. But then if we're doing something, like I work in identity systems, I talk about security a lot. We actually bring in AppSec usually if we're making kind of a bigger change. And then as the teams develop, they're starting that threat model early. They're understanding their systems and what potential risks they might need to go through and mitigate.
Did your engineers start the threat model?
Yeah.
I think that's a really key thing to keep in mind, is that at Amazon, we have our engineers write their own threat model. It starts with them. They're the ones who are best positioned to identify the threats that are unique to their system, because they have that business and technical context that the security engineers in our org don't have.
We're also trying to keep we want the engineers to do their own threat models, but oftentimes they don't think about threats the same way as security geeks do. We have guidance on how to do threat modeling. If they don't know how to do threat modeling, we teach them how to do it. But it's a continuous process too, because you're adding new features and new APIs and things, so you're changing the threat model as the system evolves. But it's important that they own the threat model. And of course, we're going to review it and make sure it's complete and comprehensive. We actually have a tool that's publicly available called Threat Composer that helps you as customers and builders of using AWS services to think about threat modeling. And we actually use it internally. It was developed by solution architects, but we use it in application security as well. And we're trying to not fork it. It's not the only thing we use. But it is available to you to help sort of shape the threat model.
And it's not like an engineer sits down and does the threat model, right? They start the doc, they start the analysis, they go talk to people, and it's like an evolution throughout all these stages. And then in build and test, I know there's penetration testing, but before the penetration testing even happens, we have a lot of automated tooling of things you just check for, right? And so as we're provisioning infrastructure, for example, there's a check that says, oh, that bucket is public. We don't do that, right? But we make sure nobody inadvertently does that, and that check pops up. In my team, I own Access Analyzer. It's actually a service that you can use to check for public buckets. And so that's a really interesting way. We just shift it left as we're provisioning resources, making sure that you have the right configuration on those resources. And that all of that automation kind of goes towards the AppSec review, because the engineers have that information. The AppSec engineer has that information. And it's not this big bang security review. It's this evolution and kind of be like, okay, now we're going to review it all right before you kind of deploy and get it out the door. And so that I think this like bringing security in at every level really helps. Now, if you don't have this, right, don't think you have to go put it at every level. I would pick one. Maybe it's just, hey, my engineers, I'm going to add a few questions to that design doc, or we're just going to incorporate one test in the build phase. So.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I want to touch a little bit deeper on threat modeling and tell you a little story about why builders at AWS are now responsible for doing their own threat model. This dates back to many reinvents ago. And we launched something, a service team launched something, and turned out the experience didn't quite delight customers. They didn't like the experience that they were, the user experience in the console, and a COE was cut. And the result of that COE was the reason why they made that decision was because there's a security requirement that our organization imposed that the engineering team just did because they felt like they had to do it. That sucks. That totally sucks. So we decided we needed to have a better way to empower engineers to push back on security requirements when they are the right thing to do for the customer. And that started with threat modeling, because the builder owning the threat model and identifying the threats that are unique to them gives them and empowers them to be able to effectively escalate when something doesn't make sense for their service. And they're much better equipped to make that case with objective information about why it doesn't fit for them. And so that's kind of where it started, which is really cool. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about escalation. So
It's my favorite word.
in the build life cycle, inevitably, there are going to be things that are identified, no matter how early you start thinking about security, that require escalation. So we tell me, like, first off, actually, why is there a cake on this slide?
There's a cake on the side. So Eric Brandwein, maybe you've seen some talks for him. He is a big voice of security in AWS and now Amazon. And he would get up on stage and almost like anytime he can, he's like, escalate, 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 especially when it came to security. And, you know, he was the big, he kind of said, we have round-the-clock security teams. You can always cut a security SEC2. You can always pull in a leader. And so I was one who actually used this escalation path all the way up to Eric Brandwein, and he was so great about it. And just like kept asking questions, was like calm, like very level-headed, just trying to get to the right answer for our customers and for our security bar. And I sent him a cake that said escalate on it. So he got to his house, and this was like during the time we were all working remote, and he got a cake with escalate on it. And so I was thanking him.
What an honor.
Yeah, so it was an honor. So I was thanking him for kind of creating that path for me so that we could get to it. But I think this goes back to our shared behaviors and our norms, right? So I'll see my chats, you know, an engineer would say, hey, is this a risk? Should we be doing something better here or whatnot? And the first thing all senior engineers, principal engineers, SDMs, even me will say is like, cut a security SEC2. And when that security SEC2 is cut, you know, Amazon loves tickets, and it is just a very normal behavior, right? The security team is engaged. They ask you a few questions. Leadership is engaged, so they are aware. And sometimes those security tickets are closed because it's a non-issue. We dove in, we got the right people looking at it, non-issue. Sometimes it is an issue, and then you spin off two teams for mitigation and impact, and you go that way. But the fact that a person right out of college can join my team, and if they think something is wonky, they can cut a security SEC2, and it is just a no-op. So escalation is very normalized behavior, and I know that's not the case in a lot of companies and organizations, but if you can try to get to the point, every security issue, my team knows to ping me. They ping me, Bridget, got a security issue, here's the ticket, and then I'm aware, and we go for that. So try to make escalation, especially when it comes to security, and like I said earlier, we celebrate it. When engineers, you know, cut the thing and we learn something new or we discover something, we celebrate it.
Can I pile on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's one thing for, you know, director level type positions or distinguished engineers or a CISO to say escalate, escalate, escalate. And I heard that a lot early at Amazon when I was not a senior principal but a principal, and I often escalated things, all kinds of stuff, issues, things were blocking customers on the compliance side or things like that. But I gave a talk. We do internal security conferences every year, and I gave a talk called "Escalating from the Middle." And it's easy to say escalate when you're kind of senior in a company, but when you're like in the middle management, or you're kind of like a new staff member, it can be terrifying. You're like, I'm sending this to like the chief information security officer of a huge company. You got to teach escalation too. You can't just say it. And you have to empower people to do it, but showing and teaching it. Like we have like talks on this and classes on this, like with examples. Like we de-identify them or not if it's internal, and we actually go through with people. These are examples where escalation was a good escalation, and this is one where like there wasn't enough information or it was too late. We often encourage certain behaviors like pre-escalation. Like I think this thing's going to go on fire, or this thing's going to burn badly, and I don't have all the information, but I'm just kind of putting it out there. I think there's also some kind of metric around the likelihood of escalating the closer you are to vacation, right? And so like something's going to go bad, and you're then like, oh, I guess I'm not going out of town or whatever. So having an escalation buddy is something I teach too. Is like, hey, I have to go, pick up my kid, or I gotta, go. I'm about to go on vacation. So here's all the detail, my escalation buddy. And in case this thing goes boom or whatever, then you have somebody else who's aware and close to the issues. There's a whole bunch of these little like kind of tips and tricks.
The last thing I'll say, as an engineering leader at all of my all-team meetings, I talk about security, and I always do a slide on if you discover something or think something, here's your path. And it's not only cut a ticket, it's also here are the friendly senior engineers who can help you get to that path. And so the buddy is a real thing.
Absolutely. So a takeaway of kind of some of the things that they talked about here that I want to reinforce is whatever your ownership model for security might be, make sure that when you're establishing the escalation paths and you're establishing the response paths to security issues, whether it's called a corrections of error or something else, make sure that it's aligned with your ownership model and that the right people are getting and owning the response so that it drives this virtuous cycle of continued security ownership so that they are the ones who can prevent it from happening in the future. So one last mechanism that I want to talk about, bringing it back to the executives, right? We talked about CEO, the leaders of your organization have to communicate security from the top. Well, one way that we've done this effectively is through what we call a weekly security meeting. And this was something established by Andy Jassy, our CEO, many years ago. Bill, will you tell them a little bit about how it came about?
Sure. They have a meeting every Friday between the security organization and the CEO to discuss any sort of security issues or future looking around corners kind of issues that we see. And I think it's because they want that awareness. Like it is the top priority. And if there isn't, you can say that all you want, and you can read emails on ad hoc when there's issues. But if you have a mechanism, a standing meeting or a standing procedure or something to inform the leadership of the company of where we are with our security goals or the recent security issues, but it can be a little hand-wavy to say, oh, we have a Friday meeting. I think it's quite a mechanism, really. So, if you think from like, say tomorrow or, a Friday, you go back 2 weeks. And so in week one, there's an on-call rotation that every, 6 hours around the clock, there's a director level person looking at all the issues that have come in for that shift. And that director is empowered to say, this looks like maybe they don't think security is the top priority, or there's a cultural issue, or maybe something isn't resourced correct or prioritized correctly, or this just needs further inspection. So then those are all collected. They go to a Monday meeting. In the Monday meeting, it's discussed. We engage all the service teams, and they're asked to write correction of error documents by around Wednesday as best they can. And then if we look at it again and say, okay, well, this has deep ownership. We have a path to completion. We have estimated completion dates. We have a path to mitigate or whatever, if it's not already fixed. Then if that's all good, then we kind of people go their own way. But if it's something where, you get to a certain point in an organization where you have to make trade-offs, and people might not feel empowered to make that trade-off. Like I'm going to slip a date, right? Or I'm not going to ship a feature. That's a big deal. And if someone else says, well, or you have a dependency on another team, and that's causing a delay or a security issue, sometimes you need senior leadership to resolve and make it okay and in a safe way for someone to say, okay, it's okay to slip a date. We're going to prioritize security. Or okay, we think the risk isn't as high. We can do it later or something like that. But I think the mechanism is very strong. There's a team that supports it too. This isn't just like, we don't make this up. There's people that run the process, and then there's a Friday meeting. So
I'm a consumer of that process. And so one thing that Bill mentioned is that the service team writes the COE, right? And so we are responsible for articulating the customer impact in the scenario. We're responsible for going and gathering all the data and articulating our path to mitigation and where we are on that. And so I think that's really powerful because that's where I feel ownership of like, oh, I got to go and fix this. And the one thing is that meeting was so successful that a bunch of other service areas, so we also have a similar meeting for AWS identity, right? And other service areas also have that. And so we've mimicked it. It's a little bit lighter weight, but it is the same thing. And the beauty of that meeting is that I have all of the experts and perspective together at one time. And so I use that meeting to say like, hey, we need a judgment call here. And like, let's get an answer to this question. Like, we're going to mitigate it in this way, but this might impact this other thing. And everyone's like, yep, that's the right answer. Or what about this? We've seen you do this in the past. So that's how we use those meetings. And it's very, very powerful.
And what's really cool is that that was not a directive that AWS Security gave to Identity or any other service team. Because they got involved in the CEO-led WSM meeting on occasion when things weren't going well, they decided they are going to start running their own weekly security meeting so that they can mimic that success and better prepare their teams for when they do have to go to that one.
And to be honest, we actually go to that one less because we have the one.
It's really cool. It's been really cool to see them emerge across the company without any directive from our organization.
They even have one in the sales organization. I mean, the solution architects, professional services, technical account managers, and actual sellers. And I think that's really, really unique that the sales organization would have their own, security engagement model and security ownership and things like that. And it's awesome. Like, we don't need to hold people accountable. They hold themselves accountable.
Awesome. I'm going to kind of breeze through a couple slides because I want to make sure we get to this last pillar. With all of these mechanisms, I mentioned earlier that there's tooling, adoption, and there's inspection in any mechanism, and oftentimes inspection's forgotten. So don't forget to inspect the mechanisms that you do put in place. Make sure that they're getting you the outcomes that you're looking for, because like I said earlier, you don't want it to become a process for the sake of a process. That is death, as Jeff would say. Okay, and now last thing, part of this pillar that I don't want anyone to forget about, because I will be very honest here, this is something that Amazon didn't do for many years. It's been a while since we've done this now, but we didn't incorporate security into the job guidelines of our software development engineers, of our software development managers. And it was actually, engineers started coming to us saying, I care so much about security, but when I'm looking to get promoted, like, I don't get to talk about all that stuff because it's not in the role guidelines. And we were like, oh my God. And so this is kind of foundational, and maybe something super actionable that you could do within your organization this year is go and incorporate security into those role guidelines. Here's some examples of how we've done it. In more junior SD roles, we say, when in doubt of whether your approach meets the security bar, escalate to a more senior person in your role. That also enforces that culture of escalation we talked about earlier, as well as enforcing security. Senior developers, we say, you identify intrinsically hard problems that may pose a critical business or security risk, right? These are those senior engineers who can look at things across the service and identify those more complex issues and how to address them where there might be more ambiguity. And then for managers, don't forget to do it in the manager's role guidelines. We say you prioritize efforts that improve overall architecture and software quality, including security, right? Because the managers, they're the ones deciding what is it that their team's working on, and you want to make sure security is incorporated into that.
Yeah, and these role guidelines are how they have dimensions in them on how people get promoted and how they're tracking their career, so it's super important.
All right, I want to dive into the last piece because it's certainly not, the last thing that you should be thinking about, and this is knowledge. Like I said earlier, our values, our norms, they help individuals determine what's important to them, but knowledge is quite frankly the means to achieving that purpose. So I want to tell you a little bit about our Guardians program. So some of you might have a similar challenge as us, where we have far more software engineers or builders in our organization than we have security team members. How many people can relate to that? Yeah, I thought so. And so we had this problem where everything, like I said, every new service that's launching, every new feature has to go through the security team. And we had this issue where they were building things, and then they would come to us, and we would identify issues in those services, controls that they hadn't even thought about, right? And when that happens, that's send it back to the service team for rework. And that rework takes time. And this is hilarious. I sent this to someone on my team who's like really creative, and they made all these like fun animations, and I think it's awesome. So just roll with me here. And then finally, it takes them back and forth. All of that takes time. And so what we did is we decided we needed to figure out how those engineering teams, how they could start thinking about security earlier, how they can know what the expectations are, so that when they are building their own security, building their own services, they're thinking about security within the design, right? They're working on those threat models before they write even a line of code. We now have over 5,000 active engineers within our organization who have been trained on individual service teams. Our goal is to have at least one of these trained individuals on every service team. When I say service team, I mean 2-pizza team. Every manager within the organization across thousands of teams have at least one of these people who have been trained to think about security and help their team think about security. The results of this have been pretty impactful. We now see 22.5% less launch blocking findings being identified in an AppSec review as a result of this. When you put this into numbers, it's actually quite crazy. This saves almost 210,000 working days a year. Because if you look across over 10,000 launches that come through us every year, if you reduce those findings by over 22%, it has a significant impact on the ability to get new services out to customers earlier. And like I said, they're now able to launch on schedule with the appropriately high security bar. This has reduced the time it takes for these security reviews to be completed by 26.9%. That's crazy.
I want to talk about this a little bit from the engineering perspective,
Yeah,
right?
I would love
Because
that.
I've been around for a while. I've been owning engineering teams since 2018, and it used to be that the AppSec review was like, oh, let's hope, right? And now it's just like a smooth thing because we have a security guardian in a lot of our teams. And the other thing that I think is really powerful about the security guardian model is that it's a builder on the team, right? And so they work with the junior engineers, the senior engineers, and they just provide that security perspective and knowledge. And it's somebody they know, it's somebody they can talk to, it's somebody they can jam with, rather than having this AppSec engineer come from the outside. So that's the beauty of it.
Psychological safety. They feel more comfortable talking about it with their peers.
Yeah.
I mean, every builder is given basic instruction on security, but I think that the guardians are it's a much deeper training. They're almost like an AppSec engineer, and they're basically trained to do the review. They don't get to check their own homework, but they're essentially like a deputy in the service teams. And I think it's a scaling function. We have, even in the field community, in the solution architecture and ProServe and TAM community, we have security guardians because they're creating content, they're creating solutions, they're creating proofs of concept with customers. And we create and ship code, whether it's services behind APIs or something we're building for you, that has to get security reviewed. And so that we have guardians even in the sales organization as well.
Absolutely.
Right.
So
Move on.
if any of you are thinking about like, how do I do something similar? Like, where would I even start? Oh, I forgot about that cool rocket ship. You want to set a vision for what you're looking to achieve. And so I wanted to share what our vision was. And when you think about a vision statement, you really want to think 5 years out, right? So what we said is we want to nourish security ownership that consistently delights our customers with security by design throughout the development lifecycle. And I want to be clear, this was a vision, right? Because it's hard to do that. It's hard to get people to truly think about security throughout the entire development lifecycle. You can tell them all day, but it's hard to get them to do that. So my vision was that it would become something that just happens, and we exist just to nourish it. It's already happening, so we're just nourishing it. But I want to go back to what Bill said earlier, where they're like mini AppSec engineers. I actually want to encourage you to not think that way. One of the I know.
Bill.
I'm
Wow,
sorry,
right.
Bill. I'm sorry. One of the things that we did wrong at the very beginning of this program is we said, okay, let's test out this idea by working with all of the more senior engineers who have gone through lots of AppSec reviews, and let's utilize them to kind of pilot this out. And it was remarkably successful. You want to know why? Because these people already knew what they were doing. They'd already been through this. Now, what happens when you have new teams like AWS was growing quite rapidly? What happens when those teams have no one who's gone through an AppSec review before? What happens when they're comprised of only junior SDEs, right? You want to really think about like, what is the most important thing that these humans, because you have to remember these are humans and their time is very valuable, that they could be doing related to security that will have an impact on the eventual outcomes that you're looking for. If I were going to make any recommendation to you today, I would go back to what I was harping on earlier, threat modeling. Train them to threat model and have no other expectation from them at all except that they ensure their team is building a threat model before they're writing a single line of code. It will have a tremendous impact.
Because that brings the ownership, it also brings the knowledge, right?
Exactly.
And then it starts bringing the norms, and that ties it all together.
That's exactly right, and it helps, it's a conversation, because like you said earlier, threat modeling is not done in a silo. It's often a team event. You need a lot of different perspectives in order to fill it out. So anyways, start small and really think about like, what are the most important things you want humans spending time on? And then the second thing that I would really recommend that you do is focus on the power of community. So, like I say up here, while culture of security is the what to improving those security outcomes, community engagement is the how. And it all starts with, I just want to explain this flywheel real quick, the experience. So, if we focus on the Guardians' experience when they are getting trained, when they are doing shadowing, when they are doing their reverse shadows, when they are going in and actually supporting their first threat model, let's say, if we make that experience a top-notch experience where they feel supported by people, they feel like they have a support channel, someone that they can go to, they have resources to office hours to come and ask questions that are exclusively to them that they can always get into. You make that experience positive, they're going to take action. And when they take action, they're going to start to achieve things that they didn't think they could achieve. And they're going to do that collectively together as a community. And what are they going to do when they achieve things that they didn't think they can achieve? They're going to tell people about it. They're going to tell their peers. They're going to tell their manager. They're going to tell other people in the community. And those people are going to be inspired to either become a member of this community, to take the training, to jump in, or they're going to become an advocate within their own organization to get people to become more active and to take more action because of the outcomes that they're seeing. So net, my point here is don't focus too much on the outcomes that you want them to see. Pick a small outcome and focus on the community and really invest in the community and empowering that, and that will force multiply the impact that you can have in a much shorter amount of time. Now, Bill, you lead the TFC. Tell them about that community.
Yeah, we have about, I think, 46 technical field communities in the sales organization. I started the security one in 2012 or 2013. It's maybe the first or the second next to storage, and for the longest time, it was the largest. There's well over 1,000 members in the technical field community for security, mostly solution architects, but they're not all specialist solution architects. Many of them are just the solution architects, the generalists that are associated with your accounts and with customers. But it's a horizontal community, so it doesn't matter what sales segment or what part of the organization they're in. It's a cross-cutting community. It's proved out to be a really durable mechanism across a pandemic where we couldn't collaborate as we were used to doing, across reorganizations, across the massive growth of the business, and it's a way for them to all help you and know about the right way to do security. It's really the top priority for customers as well. And so we have this community of all kinds of collaboration. We have technical internal summits. We have security summits internally. We do local events, like open office hours or lunch and learns with the technical field community that is out in the field too. And so it's fun. It's like the internal security conference is one of the funnest things that people
You want to make it fun. You want it to make it something people want to talk about and care about, quite frankly. Thanks. So my last tip that I want to share with y'all is around, you can focus on the community, but don't forget to give data to the people that manage or lead the builders that you're training. Push that data to them. Here's an example on the screen of something that we send to all of the directors across our organization about the Guardians in their organization. It tells them the new Guardians who took the training. It tells them the number of security engagements they supported. It tells them how many they still have in progress. It tells them what their average like quality score was as rated by the security engineers so that they can judge themselves against the rest of the company to understand if they're at or below or above the bar. We tell them about the number of findings on average that they're being identified in those reviews, and then so they can compare that back to the rest of their organization as well as AWS. And then we highlight ones who have gone above and beyond. And you know what the impact of this is obviously I did not tell this director to send this email, but this is just one of many examples of things that they just send out immediately in response to us sending these. So this one says, thank you to everyone who participated in the program. Security is our top priority. You can tell that's a common vocabulary that our leaders use. And programs like this try to make sure that we're doing security the right way. I can't even read it this far from here, but hopefully you can read it better than I. And then he mentioned people by name. How cool is that for a junior or SDE? Maybe even someone who's only been at the company for the years, never talked to his director, to get his name called out in an email directly with his manager on it. It can be really powerful. So when you look at that flywheel that I talked about earlier, this is kind of something that will propel that flywheel even faster, is having the data that gives people the opportunity to get feedback on how they're doing so that they can improve and know where to focus, as well as recognition that motivates them to continue to go on and take that action every day that'll help them achieve things that they didn't think they could achieve. So to sum it up, to get started, set the vision, identify what's most important, go and ramp your teams up on what's most important, and then build that community, and then measure, report, and recognize that community, and enable the people within their organizations to do that. Because if you're at a company like even 1/100th the size of AWS, you will not be able to individually recognize all of these people.
Yeah.
So establish a scalable mechanism so that their leaders can recognize them, because that's even more powerful. So to wrap it up, I'm sorry I had to rush here, but we're out of time. To cultivate, a culture of security, you'll want to think about 3 key areas. Just pick one thing within each of these pillars: those values and the norms, the shared behaviors, the mechanisms, or distributing that knowledge across all of the teams within your organization. And that's going to lead to those 4 outcomes that we talked about: security ownership, psychological safety, high velocity decision making, so that eventually security can truly enable your business, which can be really powerful. So if you want to take some of the resources that we talked about here, or even find more resources related to this, we've created a webpage all about this called How AWS Sustains a Strong Culture of Security. You can see the URL down there on the screen. It's just /security/culture of security. You'll be able to see a blog there about how to build your own form of a Guardians program. It goes into more depth of some of the lessons we learned. Or another way you can learn more about it is by coming to Reinforce. So we talk about community and bringing people together. This is like the genesis of AWS's security-focused conference, where it brings people who care about security across all of our customers together in a single location to learn and grow and network. So this year it's going to be in Philadelphia, June 16th through the 18th. We will probably all be there.
We'll be there.
We would love to see you there.
It is fun.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for your time. I really appreciate it.
Good job.